to Parliament now, where COSATU is calling on the institution to crack the whip over what it calls delinquent MPs. And this comes as some members of Parliament are facing serious criticism and questions over their conduct. COSATU says that it expects the 7th Parliament to signal a firm break with tradition and act tough. Now, Tony Ehrenreich is COSATU's Deputy Parliamentary Coordinator and joins us live now for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, we've seen Parliament, for example, come under fire when one thinks about the Zondo Commission's report, for example, about issues of effective oversight, and you say that this must change.
Absolutely. As COSATU, we are really concerned that there are many MPs, and we are a few days into the term of the new administration, who have already made themselves guilty of hate speech, and then, of course, issues like Zizi Kodwa and the problems with the NK Party MP. This is unacceptable. If we want to turn over a new leaf, we want to rebuild and renew the structures of government and the structures of the liberation organizations, then we've got to act in keeping with that. Those members who have made them guilty must be removed from Parliament immediately. There must be a clear training program that makes parliamentarians absolutely clear about the immense responsibility they have, not only to ensure that the laws we passed are in keeping with the liberation promise of the Freedom Charter, but also to make sure that government is acting in pursuance of the ambitions of people. But it's more important now to bring the leadership of government in line with what's happening in our society. So immediately, given the fact that we could not reduce the amount of MPs and the amount of ministers, we've got to cut back on the expenditure into this arm of government. So there's got to be a reduction of the income levels of the new parliamentarians to make sure that they feel and experience the daily realities of most South Africans. But it's only when we do that they'll be able to align themselves to what needs to be done in our country.
I'm going to get into the cutting that you're talking about in just a moment, but I want us to stay with the issues around acting tough, especially when it comes to some of the conduct that you're raising that is currently in question. Should the House not deal with this effectively? What is at stake?
Well, they must deal with it effectively, but we must also ensure that the parties who are party to that they are absolutely clear on what they're doing. You can't, as a party, facilitate the deployment of people with serious charges against them to the important legislative house in South Africa. So that has to stop. We've got to act decisively against people who've acted in ways that are unbecoming, so that we can ensure that the new administration is focused on improving the lives of our people.
And when then, especially when you think about some of these particular individuals, some of them, as you say, we've seen, things getting charged and quite heated on social media, for example. And there are South Africans who are watching this particular behavior. There are others who are saying that, but what happens now if the people that we've tasked to this particular, institution that is supposed to hold the sanctity of South Africa? What do South Africans who are watching this unfold then say?
Understandably, South Africans who are watching it must be outraged. I think it is too much to expect due process, but then people have their rights at law. But when somebody behaves themselves in a way that's contrary to the kind of country that we want to build, that promotes non-racism, non-sexism, respect to our constitution, the rules-based system, and one that seeks to undo the horrors of apartheid. If you can't align yourself with that, then you should not be anywhere close to where the laws are made in this country and where we're trying to put in place public policy that responds to the social injury of the majority of our people. If you can't do that, in my view, they should be kicked out immediately, but there's got to be an urgent process that ensures that such unsuitable persons to represent us in Parliament are removed as a matter of urgency.
But how do we trust as South Africans that this urgent process can in fact come, come or even get underway, given what we've seen, take place in Parliament in previous years?
Well, I must say it's an important point that you're raising, and as COSATU, we're concerned about a week or two after Zizi Kodwa resigns as a result of charges against him, he's then back in Parliament, reinstated as a parliamentarian. Now, as an organization that's in alliance with the ANC, we must say we find that unacceptable. He must be removed. There must be compliance with the policy that we promised our people as an ANC organization. But likewise, MK and the DA and other parties where people have made them guilty of conduct unbecoming, those parties have an obligation to act against them urgently, but if those parties don't act, then Parliament as an institution must not only remove them from Parliament, but must ensure that they are charged with hate speech or the other appropriate charges given their conduct that's unbecoming.
So what then happens to the parties that are also failing to act, because they also become another layer of impunity here? What should Parliament be doing to deal with them as well?
Certainly, I believe that Parliament should put in place rules to address this, but we've seen how political parties cover for those who are corrupt in their ranks in the ANC. So more so in those other parties like the DA that has a practice of institutional corruption, of under apartheid, of wanting to perpetuate with those policies in a democratic South Africa. So they are as guilty of those kind of corrupt practices, but it seems that the most obvious recourse for the electorate in relation to those parties is to punish them at the ballot if they don't then call their errant parliamentarians into line and ensure that they're acting in keeping with the Constitution.
There is, of course, another issue here, which a lot of South Africans are looking to see if, in fact, things will improve in this particular regard. That's around accountability and action that also needs to be taken about some of the things that come out from the committees, for example. We've seen in the past significant developments coming out in these committees with very little accountability to none in some cases.
Absolutely. There has been a neglect of accountability, of responding to the electorate when they've expressed outrage amongst the practices that are taking place. But it's clear that the electorate has punished people for that. The ANC is the first recipient of that punishment because it had thought it could behave with impunity and cover for those corrupt individuals in the ranks of the ANC. Clearly, the ANC has its policies of the Freedom Charter and its commitment to the liberation of our people is an important political party, and their message and their policy platform is one that COSATU embraces. But if the individuals who are responsible for executing that does not act in keeping with the values that we hold dear as a democratic South Africa, then they must be removed. And the electorate must deal with those parties if the party bosses and the governmental institutions does not want to correct this errant practices. The ANC Senate, they now probably have lost more than 20%, where they're now under 40%, so that's a good lesson to people who don't want to listen to the electorate. But that is what should be the future for all parties that sends crooks to act on our behalf in Parliament.
All right, Tony, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. That was Tony Ehrenreich, who is COSATU's Deputy Parliamentary Coordinator.